So, the steps of affirmative care, can you kind of walk me through that? So, let's say I bring my child in and my child is prepubescent, we'll say like 10 years old. And I'm like, let's say that it's a daughter and, she knows that she's a boy. So, at 10, like what are the steps for puberty blockers and then how does that kind of escalate?
Well, usually there's a form of social transition that's kind of offered up first, and that's described as a kind of softer option. But actually, we know that it sets children down a slippery slope towards further transitioning. But that might be things like changing pronouns, changing name, changing dress, things like that. But studies have shown that if a child starts to live as if they were the other sex, it actually changes the hardwiring in their brain. It makes it less likely they'll become comfortable in their own body. So that's an issue. So you've got the social transitioning, then you've got, as you mentioned, the puberty blockers. The issue here is that a lot of proponents of transitioning say to parents and these young children, well, it's better that they start on the puberty blockers as early as possible, possibly even before they've actually started puberty, because then if they want to go even further with the transition, it will be a lot easier. So you've got this, ridiculous scenario in which children who have never even experienced puberty are being put on these puberty blockers. And if they progress straight from that onto cross sex hormones later on, they can be left permanently infertile. So, yes, puberty blockers can be given at a very young age. Then come the cross sex hormones. Again, the age that those can be administered depends on the jurisdiction. And then you've got the sex reassignment surgery, as they would call it, whether that's phalloplasties or double mastectomies. In the UK at the moment, you can only get those when you're 18 or above. But I've come across guidance recently from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and they've said that they believe that children of any age should be allowed to receive these surgeries, which is truly shocking.
Whoa. That's really hard to believe or get your head around because when it comes to understanding the ramifications of any of those decisions, your brain's not even close to being formed yet, like to completion. Like I can't go smoke a cigarette if I'm not 18. Well, I think even now it's 21 for those vapes. So you don't trust me to understand the health consequences of this vape, but you expect a child to understand the health consequences of these drugs that don't have any longitudinal studies.
Mm.
That's nuts to me. And I'm curious in the process, I don't know if you are familiar with people that are actually like prescribing these to children, but like do they go over the side effects and the potential risks with the parents or do they just kind of say do this otherwise, your kid might be so depressed that they become suicidal, which is what I had Buck Angel on the podcast years ago and he says that's like a common tactic which is like to guilt the parents like would you it's this horrible quote that you see it's like like would you rather have a son or a dead daughter or something like that and it's like whoa how dare you use that with parents that's horrific and that's negligence by any stretch.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of fear mongering, a lot of manipulation of statistics. You've got that on one side. On the other side, you've got a kind of commercialization of this and almost a glorification of it. I'm increasingly seeing pictures, even of gender clinics, where they've got the surgeon after the operation posing next to this young person with their kind of double mastectomy scars. I can't think of any other type of medical procedure for a serious condition that we would engage in that. And then you've got celebrities as well, increasing numbers of celebrities coming out as trans and then again posing with their scars, etc. Very much sending a message to children and young people that, if you do this, it's all going to be okay. You're going to feel good about yourself. So I do worry that the ramifications are not being explained properly to children. But even if they are explained properly, we come back to this issue of age of consent. And as you just said, we're allowing children here to make irreversible decisions, even though we don't allow them to buy a lottery ticket or smoke a cigarette. So to my mind, it doesn't particularly matter whether the clinic explains these things. These children should not be allowed to consent to it at all.
So why do you think that our idea of consent is so inconsistent? Like why can I say you can consent to puberty blockers or you can consent to surgical intervention, at least in some states here, but you can't consent to a tattoo, you can't consent to a beer, you can't consent to having sex with someone with an adult, right? Like if you want to take it to that extremity. So why is there not more of an alignment with just that simple term?
Well, I mean, pure and simply, the safeguarding has gone out the window. But I think the reason for that is because of this idea of identity and the way in which this has kind of infiltrated society. Because the way it's pushed, particularly by the media and a lot of politicians, is that this isn't a mental health condition. This is just somebody's identity. They almost equate it with things like your race or your religion, And so we're not, we're not medically mutilating people. We're simply allowing them to live in the body that they always should have been born into. And it's a very different narrative, really. And it kind of, as I say, it takes on the same stature as somebody's race. It's almost that it's simply allowing them to be who they always were. I think that's one of the core issues. And so as a result of that, the safeguarding kind of goes out the window because it is completely inconsistent. I mean, we've had debates in the UK over recent weeks around this because in Scotland, they were looking to pass legislation allowing 16-year-olds to legally change their sex. And one of the Scottish politicians came out and said that in their mind, children of the age of 8 should be allowed to legally change their sex. And I was doing some research online of what things 8-year-olds aren't allowed to do. They're not allowed in the UK to set up a bank account, and they're not allowed to create a Facebook account. And yet we're suggesting that they can legally change their sex. I mean, it's crazy.